We are entering week 4 of the Sean Diddy Combs criminal trial, and there is one name that has come up quite a bit. Not only someone who may know quite a few things about the rap mogul, but someone who may be the key to this whole racketeering case. Will Kristina Khorram, Combs' alleged right-hand woman, testify? And what could she say exactly? Well, we're going to dive into what other witnesses have said about her so far and her alleged role in this whole saga. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Hey everybody, listen up. This is another Law&Crime legal alert. If you received Depo-Provera birth control shots or were later diagnosed with a brain or spinal tumor called meningioma, you may be eligible for a lawsuit. Morgan & Morgan is investigating claims that patients were improperly warned about this risk. It's free to check, takes just a few minutes, and you don't pay unless they win. So scan the QR code on screen, click the link below, or head over to forthepeople.com/LCDepo to see if you qualify. Kristina Khorram, Sean Diddy Combs' reported former chief of staff. Now, she might not have testified in his criminal trial as of yet, but she's got to, right? I mean, in a prostitution, sex trafficking, especially a racketeering case like this, where prosecutors allege that Combs operated this criminal enterprise that engaged in a pattern of illegal activities for his benefit, and that he used his company resources and his staff to carry out crimes and cover them up, Khorram has to be a central witness who's going to testify for the government, right? Don't you need to explain the inner workings of this operation? Particularly if you charge Combs with racketeering conspiracy, right? This criminal agreement that he criminally agreed to further racketeering activity. He can't do it by himself. The natural question becomes, based on what has been said in court so far about Kristina Khorram, is she a co-conspirator who's now going to testify against him? Has she been granted protection to do so? And to think about that, his former chief of staff, someone who has been described as his right-hand person, testifying against him, isn't that going to be devastating? That is what we're going to discuss, and how she's already been brought up so many times in this trial so far. It is fascinating because the name Kristina Khorram has already come up quite a bit since the Combs legal saga began. She has been mentioned in several lawsuits against the rap mogul and even named as a defendant in some of them too. For instance, a woman named Ashley Parham filed a suit claiming she was violently gang raped by comedian Drewski, NFL star Odell Beckham, and violently assaulted with a remote by Sean Combs. And in that lawsuit, as far as Khorram, it says, quote, defendant Kaye told defendant Diddy that she did not think giving plaintiff a Glasgow smile would be advantageous to their potential clients who they could sell plaintiff for sex to. Defendant Kaye then made a threat to plaintiff that they could ship her off anywhere in the world and that she would never see her family or anyone she knew ever again. There was also an accusation that Combs had forced Kristina Khorram to use a syringe to insert an IUD into Parham. And apparently, she and Combs argued over it, not over actually doing it, but that it wasn't going to work. Really weird allegation, but a serious allegation nonetheless. And that's not the only lawsuit that she's been named in as a defendant. She was named in another suit that was filed by a series of plaintiffs, and they claim that she, quote, aided Combs in his abuse of men and women and covered up sexual assaults. She was also reportedly mentioned in other lawsuits, like one that was filed by a former employee who claims that Khorram would order him to clean up hotel rooms after Combs' wild sex parties. And maybe most famously, and the first time I personally heard of her name, was when she was named as a defendant in the lawsuit brought by Combs' former producer, Rodney Lil Rod Jones, who claims sexual harassment, violation of the racketeering statute. He claims Kristina Khorram manages the day-to-day of Combs' alleged criminal and sex trafficking enterprise, and basically made the allegation that she was like the Ghislaine Maxwell of this operation. Obviously a reference to the associate of deceased financier Jeffrey Epstein. Ghislaine Maxwell ended up getting convicted of sex trafficking charges and sentenced to 20 years in prison. And by the way, I'll tell you what, as reported by The Hollywood Reporter, Combs seemingly highlighted Kristina Khorram in a 2021 Facebook post, writing, KK keeps everything in my life and my business running. She's been my right hand for the last 8 years and has consistently proven to execute and get S done. Don't know how I'd function without her. Now, a few months back, Khorram released a statement that was published by USA Today, first reported by Rolling Stone, and she said the following: for months, Horrific accusations have been made about me in various lawsuits regarding my former boss. These false allegations of my involvement are causing irreparable and incalculable damage to my reputation and the emotional well-being of myself and my family. I have never condoned or aided and abetted the sexual assault of anyone, nor have I ever drugged anyone. The idea that I could be accused of playing a role in or even being a bystander to the rape of anyone is beyond upsetting, disturbing, and unthinkable. That is not who I am, and my heart goes out to all victims of sexual assault. I am confident that the allegations against me will be proven to be untrue. Now, to be clear, while those specific allegations in the civil lawsuits haven't come up in the criminal trial, she has come up in a lot of ways already during testimony in Sean Combs' criminal case, which again makes me wonder, will she testify for the prosecution? Is it possible that she can actually help the defense? Give an example. Give an example of an idea of how she's come up so far and her potential value as a witness. So Combs' former assistant, George Kaplan, testified about Kristina Khorram. Who did you personally report to when you were Mr. Combs' assistant? I reported to Kristina Khorram, who is the director of his office. Do you recognize the person in that photograph? Yes. Who is that? Kristina Khorram. The same Kristina Khorram you were just talking about? Yes. Do you know her by any other names? KK. What was her role within Combs Enterprises? She was the director of Mr. Combs' executive office. So what were her job responsibilities? She essentially ran Mr. Combs' life. And more specifically, with respect to the charges that Combs faces, remember prosecutors are saying that women like Cassandra Ventura were forced into elaborate, prolonged sexual performances known as freak-offs with commercial sex workers that happened in various places, in various hotel rooms, and that Combs had his people prepare the rooms and clean them up afterwards. So if we accept that these are essentially crime scenes, listen to what Kaplan said on the stand. Who usually instructed you to set up a hotel room for Mr. Combs? Either Mr. Combs himself or Kristina. When you say Kristina, do you mean Kristina Khorram? Yes. A lot more to get into. I want to bring in right now former Palm Beach County State Attorney Dave Aronberg, who hosts Legal AF, which is part of the Midas Touch Network. Dave, so good to have you on here. Am I wrong? She's got to be called. She's got to be called as a witness in this case, no?
Absolutely. I mean, when you said that she was referred to as Diddy's right hand, it was Diddy who said that. So yeah, she has to. And it is very telling that she has not been charged with any crime. Why do you think? I mean, if she is allegedly the Ghislaine Maxwell to Diddy in this case, why has she not been charged like Ghislaine Maxwell? Well, I would think it's because she's already cut a deal with prosecutors. Otherwise, I think it'd be game on, and she would be in the prosecutor's crosshairs. So I do expect that she is cooperating, at least in some way, with the prosecution, and I do think she will appear at trial.
How do you think specifically she would prove racketeering or help prove racketeering or criminal enterprise? How would she prove the sex trafficking of Cassandra Ventura? How would she help prove transportation to engage in prostitution, transporting alleged victims and sex workers with the intent that they engage in prostitution and sex work? What are some of the things you think she'd be called to testify about?
When you have to prove racketeering, you've got to prove an ongoing criminal enterprise, not some ad hoc thing that you do with your friends and acquaintances, an enterprise. Well, if you're going to say that Diddy's record company is part of this criminal enterprise, you have to call employees of that company. Who better than Diddy's right hand? She knows, metaphorically speaking, where all the bodies are buried. So when it comes to racketeering, whether there were two predicate crimes, she can provide evidence. She can provide evidence that this is an ongoing criminal operation. And yes, she can provide evidence on the other count of human trafficking to show that Diddy allegedly harbored, transported, in other ways, created this system of force, fraud, and abuse that led these individuals like Cassie to perform sex acts for money. And that's what happened. When you talk about human trafficking, it's a commercial sex act and you need force, fraud, or coercion. Well, that's what we're talking about here, and that's the evidence that this witness can provide.
So it came out during testimony that Homeland Security, HSI, they seized a cell phone of Kristina Khorram on September 16th, 2024 at the Park Hyatt Hotel. When Combs was ultimately arrested. That's got to be quite telling. A very interesting piece of evidence.
Oh, man, you don't want the authorities to have your phone, right? The phone tells all. I mean, so many cases we've seen where there are new charges that come after the authorities get your phone. And so, yes, so you think you would have to assume that the authorities know everything that KK knows. That's what Diddy calls her. And that's why the fact that she has not been charged tells me that she has been cooperating. She could be called as a rebuttal witness by the feds, or she could, as you said, and perhaps she'll be called as a defense witness. That is perilous, though, because if she lies on the stand, that could result in a perjury charge. Even if she cut a deal with prosecutors for immunity, that doesn't cover perjury. So it is a minefield if you call her to the stand as part of the defense. I think perhaps the prosecution has her lying in wait in case they need her as a rebuttal witness.
So I'm going to get into a minute all the times, or a lot of the times, that she was mentioned already in testimony, and kind of give us a preview of what she might testify to and how she might be used by the prosecution and the defense. But real quick, as a point of law, the allegations that she's facing in the civil lawsuits, whether she's named as a defendant or not, you think any of that is going to come up in the criminal case against Sean Combs?
Well, it could. I mean, it's fair game if she's called to the stand. The accusations against her can come in. I mean, if she testifies against Diddy, Diddy's people can tear her apart by pointing the finger at her. They can try to make her into the bad guy, into her as the one who is trying to save her own hide by coming up with these lies. She's the one being sued, and she's going to say anything to get out of it. So that's the kind of thing you could see if she does turn on Diddy. On the other hand, the fact that she's been sued by various people and with really salacious allegations, yeah, that is something that's going to hang over her head. And that is something that Diddy can use against her if she is called by the prosecution as a rebuttal witness.
I want to talk a little bit about how she was already brought up during the course of this trial. So I mentioned George Kaplan. So he testified that he was a witness to the abuse of Cassandra Ventura, victim number one in this case. Prosecutors say that Combs used violence, threats, financial control, intimidation, manipulation to coerce her into commercial sex acts, right? Sex trafficking. And Kaplan said that one time he was on a private plane, heard glass shattering, and he sees Sean Combs holding up a whiskey glass over his head. Cassie's on the floor. Her hands are in front of her face. He also said he observed Combs throw green apples at another girlfriend of his in his Miami home. So this pattern of abusing women, important for racketeering. And this is the back and forth. Question: what did you tell KK? I gave her a recount of what I had observed the night before. Did you tell her everything you have just told us? Yes. What, if anything, did you tell her about what you had observed on the jet involving Cassie? I had told her each time that I witnessed any sort of violent act. Did you tell KK about the incident on the jet? Yes. Do you remember being asked about the conversation you had that next day with Kristina Khorram? Yes. Did you tell her about both of these incidents during that conversation? No. Which incident did you tell her about? The green apple incident. And earlier, had you told her about the incident on the jet? Yes. What did you tell her about why you decided to quit working for Mr. Combs during that conversation? I think the words I used were that I was unwilling to stand by the behavior. What behavior were you talking about in the context of that conversation with Kristina? The green apples and the airplane incident. Did you tell Kristina you were going to quit because of that? Yes. Did Kristina say she was going to quit too? No. Did Kristina, as far as you know, quit any time after you left? No. As far as you know, how long did Kristina stay working for Mr. Combs after you told her about these two incidents that shook you tremendously? I haven't spoken to her in a while, but my understanding was that she was working for him up until pretty recently. Dave, what does that tell you?
Tells you, allegedly, she was in on the whole thing. I mean, she seems to be the one employee that hasn't broken from Diddy, that hasn't been attacked or threatened. And why is that? Because allegedly she has been carrying out Diddy's criminal enterprise. That's what the government, I'm sure, believes. But why hasn't she been charged? Because she knows so much she could sink Diddy. So I think that's why. Or maybe if they haven't cut a deal with her, they're waiting to charge her afterwards, like Ghislaine Maxwell was charged afterwards, but after Jeffrey Epstein. But I think it's more likely that a deal's been cut. I mean, some of these allegations are crazy.
And the jury would know about that? She'll be asked about that, right?
About whether she cut a deal with prosecutors? Oh, yeah. That's always used by defense lawyers to undermine the credibility of a witness, saying, oh, you're here under immunity agreement, right? You know, you cut a deal with prosecutors, right? You're facing decades in prison, and that's why you're here lying on the stand. That's the kind of stuff they do. By the way, it doesn't mean she's lying. It just means that she's thinking about herself. That's human nature. Yeah. I just had to say, all these incidents, I mean, how can Diddy survive in the court of public opinion no matter what happens here? I mean, you have the Green Apple incident.
Well,
I mean, I actually just had to Google the Glasgow smile. I didn't even know what that was.
so that allegation, right, was from one of the civil suits. I mean, look, the court of public opinion, I don't think there's a way for him to recover. The the actual criminal trial, it does become a question. Does it amount to sex trafficking? Does it amount to racketeering? I could play both sides here. I could do a whole analysis back and forth about whether or not at this point in the trial the prosecution's proven it or not. I think they're convinced he might not be a great guy. He might have abused people, but does it amount to a criminal enterprise? And that's why I think Kristina Khorram may be an important witness. By the way, Cassie Ventura also testified about Kristina Khorram too. Listen to this exchange. When you mention trusted assistants, who were some of the trusted assistants? I mean, in the very beginning, it was David James. It just kind of changed over time. Kristina Khorram, eventually, Neil Dominic, he had a lot of different assistants. At what point in your relationship did you start communicating with Miss Khorram? As soon as she started, I'm not positive the year. Was that in the beginning, the middle, or the end of your relationship with Sean? It was like the middle of the relationship. What did you call Miss Khorram? I called her KK. And how frequently did you interact with KK? Every day. And what subject matters did you communicate with KK about? Everything from scheduling to what kind of mood he was in. I talked to KK about a lot. She knew a lot of my personal things. Aside from conversations you had with your attorney, which I don't want you to ask about, was there any other way you went about trying to contact Sean regarding the book chapters? By the way, I'm taking different pieces of the testimony, but this is, I believe, was about Ventura allegedly offering Combs the rights to her book about her experiences, about her time with him, possibly that he would buy them for $30 million. Well, anyway, Ventura responded, yeah, I reached directly out to Kristina, to KK. What did you ask KK? I asked if he had read it and or just knew about it at all. And she said that basically it hadn't been taken seriously. Like, I don't think anybody believed that that was actually me. So what do you mean you don't think anyone believed that was you? She said it wasn't taken seriously, like they didn't think that I would do something like that. Then, by the way, she testified about an episode where Combs had allegedly tried to get into her apartment. So listen to this exchange. Ms. Ventura, how do you know Sean was trying to get into the apartment? Because I was notified by his assistant. Who told you Sean was trying to get into your apartment? Well, Kerry, because she was there, and Kristina Khorram. What, if anything, could you hear while this was happening? Just chaos outside the door, banging, kicking, yelling. So Dave, according to Ventura, Khorram was essentially in the thick of it all. And it does make you wonder, you know, exactly, does she corroborate Cassandra Ventura's account, and how much is she going to be grilled about this? Again, I think a central role she might play.
Yeah, the big defense for Diddy and all this is consent. He's trying to make jurors believe that Cassie and the others consented to this activity. If you can prove or at least show some doubt that there was consent here for that alleged human trafficking, then the whole case falls apart. So how do you combat that if you're Cassie? Well, you have corroboration. You have other witnesses who have testified, but also you have contemporary statements that she made to KK. Statements that said, here, this is what's happening. This is what's happening. And that kind of stuff's important because it shows that Cassie was being forced into it or was being coerced into it. And any statement she makes at the time can come in to show her present sense impressions, that she was thinking like this at the time. This was her spontaneous comments, and it shows that she was under duress, that it was not consensual. So KK is valuable for a lot of reasons. And that's why I guess maybe I'm a little surprised she has not been called yet by the...
Let's talk about that.
But that could happen. Yeah.
I think it was strategic because other people have already testified about her too, right? And I think it's strategic on the part of prosecutors to not call her yet. Why do I say that? Deontay Nash, this was Combs and Cassie's stylist, took the stand. Question, who on Mr. Combs' staff did you talk to about the violence you observed Mr. Combs inflict on Cassie? Derek and Kristina. Who is Kristina? Puff's assistant. How did Kristina respond when you told her about violence you observed between Mr. Combs and Cassie? That she would talk to him. Then there was an objection, the court overruled it. And did the violence stop after she said that? No. You said he would blow everyone's phone up. Who's the he? Puff. And when you say blow everyone's phone up, what did you mean? He would call incessantly. Who did you see him call incessantly? Me and Cassie. And who else during those same periods called you and Cassie? Kristina. Kristina Khorram? Yes. Did you answer any of those calls? Yes. When you answered Mr. Combs' calls, what did he say? he would just say we needed to get back to the house. She needs to get back to the house. And what do you remember his tone being? Sometimes angry. Sometimes he would soften up. And what do you remember Kristina saying when you answered her calls? That she was going to help with the situation, that he's calmed down, that we should come back to the house. Then there was Ventura's former friend Kerry Morgan, who testified about Kristina Khorram. Question: why would Miss Khorram tell you she was trying to call you if he couldn't get in touch with Cassie, usually? Did she ever tell you who had told her to call? Well, I'm assuming it would be Sean. Without assuming, did she ever say that he had told her to call? Yes. And she testified about this alleged encounter when Combs allegedly showed up to Ventura's home, pounding on the door with a hammer. This, by the way, was after the infamous 2016 hotel video of Combs appearing to beat up Cassandra Ventura. Morgan testified police were called after Combs couldn't get into the apartment. Quote, who, if anyone, did you tell about the police officers arriving at the apartment? Kristina Khorram. Miss Morgan, do you recognize the participants in this chat? Yes. Who are they? Me and Kristina. Could you please read your first two messages? I'm so sorry I missed your calls. I'm just so not used to this S. Are you okay? And then the first two messages on the next page. It's so dramatic. I haven't been looking at my phone. We're okay, but it's just so nuts. Okay, turning to this next message, can you read it, please? I don't think anyone should call her. Who is the her you're referring to? Cassie. Did you send an attachment with this message? Yes. What was that attachment? It's the card that the detective left. I'll read Miss Khorram's messages if you read your own, please. Can I call you in a bit when I'm alone? She was looking for anyone to say the wrong thing so she can call domestic abuse. Who is the she that you're referring to in this statement? The police officer that came? Okay, turning to the next messages, could you please read? Of course. Cass just asked me to send you that. And what were you referring to when you said Cass just asked me to send you that? The business card of the detective. In these messages, Miss Khorram mentioned she is going to call you. Did you talk with Miss Khorram on the phone after this? I'm not sure. Mia, Combs' former assistant, Mia took the stand, testified that Combs physically and sexually assaulted her. And she, too, testified about how Kristina Khorram was in the thick of it, the knowledge component, alleged cooperation or facilitating this. So Khorram would contact her, allegedly, when Combs wanted to get a hold of her. Again, alleged victim number 4. But it's interesting. For example, Khorram allegedly messaged her, he just called me again, and he said he needs you to call him now. I told him everything you said, and he does not want to listen, and said you need to call him now. Mia, I'm sorry. I don't know what else to do. Mia, he just told me to tell you if you don't call him in the next 2 minutes, you don't have a job. Dave, is Khorram a reluctant co-conspirator for racketeering conspiracy? And by the way, strategic, I think it was strategic to bring her up so much for the jury that when she finally does maybe testify, the jury is very familiar with who Kristina Khorram is. So 2 points there. Do you think she's a reluctant co-conspirator? Because again, racketeering conspiracy, he can't be it himself. And was there this ambivalence? And again, I think the strategic point of it was the jury's going to recognize her when if and when she testifies.
Yeah. Well, at times she does appear to be a reluctant co-conspirator, like that last email you read. But at other times, she seems to eagerly try to cover up for him and really enable him. So, yeah, it just depends. You could get her both ways. You can get her as someone who was full-fledged in on the racketeering, and other times that she was had a conscience and she was reluctant to go along, but she ultimately did. Either way, you got her as part of the conspiracy, the racketeering. You know, you could have done it either way. You could have brought her in after all the other people testified because they all corroborate each other. So if she goes up and lies, she'll look really bad, and it could blow back on the defense and say, oh, this is the employee covering up, and then you could always charge her for perjury. But I do think there is value, as I've been saying, about calling her as a rebuttal witness. It's like the sword of Damocles hanging over Diddy's head. You want to play? You want to put on some lies on your defense? I got the ace in the hole. I got that sword of Damocles. I've got KK who will come and just corroborate everything Cassie said and undermine everything you said in your case. So you better be careful what you say in your defense.
Before we wrap things up, I have to talk to you about what I think the defense might do with her, right? And whether or not she'll be called by the defense. Seems unlikely. Seems like she'd be called by the prosecution. But if you go back to the cross-examination of these witnesses by Combs' defense attorneys and how these people were questioned specifically by Combs' attorneys about Kristina Khorram, I wonder if it gives us kind of a preview of how they might use Kristina Khorram for their benefit if she testifies. For example, George Kaplan, this was cross-examination. explaining who Kristina Khorram was. She was my immediate boss. Certainly in the first 6 months that I was there, she told me what to do and when to do it. I learned how to do the job very much from her guidance. I talked to her more than I talked to any other individual on the staff. We certainly bonded over the amount of time that we spent together, which was many hours in different locations and late nights and things like that. You said that at some point you spoke to Kristina about the violence that you saw, correct? Correct. And if I remember your answer right, I think you said that Kristina was disappointed and saddened, correct? And that's what she expressed to you in the conversation you had with her, right? Correct. And she was disappointed in Mr. Combs. Is that right? Yes. As were you? Yes. You and Kristina had a conversation when you said, this is what I saw. You told her what you saw, and you were disappointed, and even more than disappointed. I was sad. You were sad. And part of the reason you were sad, and tell me if it's right, I'm sorry for doing this way, because it's sad, right? Yeah, it's horrible. Then there was this cross of Kerry Morgan. KK was Sean Combs' chief of staff or personal assistant. She was with him all the time. She took care of she was like his right hand, basically. She's a good, really nice girl. Question to Morgan was, did you have your own relationship with KK? I did. And tell us about that. About a relationship? Yeah. It wasn't, we would only see each other when she was working or when I was hanging out with them, but we would hang out at Burning Man and stuff. She was there, we would hang out, we weren't that close, but understood. You said a minute ago that she's a nice girl. Just tell us more. She's a nice girl. She always seemed very innocent, and she's always trying to help everybody. She was always nice. I think that's deliberate here, Dave, right? I think it goes to the idea of this was all domestic violence. She didn't approve of it. She had no choice but to, do what Sean Combs wanted, but it wasn't necessarily a crime. She's a good person. Is that what you're getting from this cross?
Yes, and it is interesting in this case how both sides are working off largely the same facts. There's not too much of a dispute over the facts. It's just how to interpret them. On the defense, they're saying, yeah, Diddy was a bad guy. He was jealous. He is a domestic abuser, and so he should perhaps be charged in state court. But this is a federal trial, not on domestic abuse, but on racketeering, on human trafficking, on prostitution. Those charges don't apply. And here's the evidence, as we're going to interpret it, that proves this. This is a case of a jealous guy who had issues and committed some bad acts, but it wasn't human trafficking. It wasn't racketeering. That's a defense. On the other hand, the prosecution can paint this larger picture of a guy who's out of control, who ran this whole enterprise to do his bidding. And that included KK. That included force, fraud, and coercion for human trafficking. That included prostitution. And yes, it included racketeering through at least 2 predicate acts. We saw the Kid Cudi arson. We've seen the witness intimidation. We've seen the extortion, all these acts. So pick your poison, guilty.
I think the defense is basically saying there was no criminal agreement. She didn't agree to further any of this illegal activity. She didn't further sex trafficking operation, right? This idea was she didn't approve of any of this. She didn't condone any of this. I think that's what they're going with. So it'll be very interesting to see if Kristina Khorram takes the stand. She's already been mentioned so many times. Dave Aronberg, thank you so much for taking the time, sir. Good to see you.
Thank you, Jesse.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.